Imagine you went into your doctor's office and suddenly he injected you with some strange substance. You said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a poison." You said, "Why did you inject me with a poison?" Immediately, he pulled out another syringe and injected you with an antidote. And he said, "I injected you with that so that I could save your life with this antidote." Well, why would you have done any of it in the first place? Well, because I wanted to save your life. That's what I do. That is exactly how liberal economics work. They do massive economic damage to our country, and then they claim to be its solution, its antidote. The government blocks home building with taxes and red tape, then sets up a fourth federal housing agency to subsidize housing. This Liberal Prime Minister blocks resource projects with high taxes, 19-year permitting delays, bans on oil shipping off the BC coast, then creates massive new offices to get projects built that promise carve-outs, bailouts, and handouts to favored businesses. He blocks investments with high taxes, drives $1.2 trillion of pension fund out of the country, and then subsidizes investment with new corporate welfare programs. He drives up the cost of living and the cost of food with inflationary money printing, carbon taxes, and red tape, then prints even more money to give people cash payments to help them with the cost of the food he inflated. He blocks development, taxes production, regulates investment, delays permits, drives capital away, kills projects, crushes builders. Then, when the economy slows down, he shows up with a subsidy, a fund, a bank, a summit, a task force, and a photo op to solve the very problem that he caused. So instead of just following the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, this government does plenty of harm and then claims that it provides the cure. As the great Ronald Reagan said, if something moves, a Liberal taxes it. If it keeps moving, he regulates it. And when it stops moving, he subsidizes it. Why not just get out of the way and let things move? Why not let the builder build, the worker work, the investor invest, the farmer farm, the miner mine, the manufacturer manufacture, the trucker truck? Because then there would be no role for the Liberal politician. No power, no control, no permit to authorize, no check to hand out. If you could just launch a business, produce resources, grow food, build homes, then the Prime Minister and those within his castle walls would be irrelevant. Instead, he forces everything to go through him. You basically creates a regulatory prison and charges a ransom for anyone who wants to build something to get out of it. Want a place to live or food in your stomach? Wait for the government to send you back some of your money. Want to build a home or a pipeline? Kneel before the king and seek his good graces. Want investment for your enterprise? Bow before the state. State-controlled crony capitalism is how this Liberal Prime Minister enriched himself. In fact, his Brookfield investments profit off government favors that typically help a tiny group of politically powerful but unproductive takers at the expense of the great mass of productive makers. Help is the sunny side of control. The illusion of action from people who caused the problem. The illusion of investment from the people who drove the investment away. The illusion of growth from those who blocked the growth. Because in this Liberal model, the economy does not belong to the people, it belongs to the politicians, bureaucrats, and other authorities who control it and the powers that influence them. That is the real debate in our economy today. A political economy versus a market economy. A political economy allocates wealth based on power. A market economy allocates wealth based on free choice. Enter the sovereign wealth fund. That has no wealth, another Liberal illusion. Countries with real sovereign wealth funds like Singapore, Norway, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates accumulate surpluses year after year, which they squirrel away and invest to grow bigger returns for their people. This Liberal Prime Minister has no surplus to invest. In fact, the net equity of this government is negative $1.3 trillion. If you take all the assets and deduct all the liabilities, that is what's left. We call that our national debt. Just yesterday, he announced that he's running, or 2 days ago, he announced that he's running the 11th Liberal deficit put on the national credit card. More debt, more taxes, more costs, more on the credit card. He's just another Liberal. In fact, he's doubled the deficit since Trudeau left office. So he has no wealth to put into the wealth fund. He has something else, debt. He wants to put $25 billion more on our national credit card to invest in politically connected companies. And who will get the money? Those with political power. The Liberal Prime Minister plans to hold yet another summit, this time with multinational corporations and billionaires, to offer them access to this government money and allow them to circumvent the brutal red tape and taxes he imposes on all other businesses. He will demand that these businesses who ultimately get permits to go ahead and go around the restrictive red tape and taxes will give the government an ownership stake. It's almost like charging a ransom for letting them out of the regulatory prison he has created. Now, the million or so small businesses without lobbyists will still be stuck in that regulatory prison, forced to pay taxes to subsidize their larger, more politically powerful competitors. It's the golden rule. Those with the gold make the rules. The small elite turns power into wealth, wealth back into more power, and that more power back into more wealth, and the cycle continues until they have it all. They get richer, making everyone else poorer. In a political economy, they profit not by having the best product, but by having the best lobbyists. It's not how much value you create for customers, it's how much influence you have over ministers, regulators, agencies, and insiders. The most important commodities in the political economy is influence and power. In a market economy, you get ahead by serving the people. You sell a product only if someone wants to buy it. You hire a worker only if a worker freely chooses the job and the employer values the work. You attract investment only if you can prove that you can create more value tomorrow than you consume today. That is the magic of the free market. You cannot get ahead without making someone else better off, and we know that because they would not engage in the voluntary transaction if it did not make them better off. That's why in a free market, when you buy something, you say thank you to the vendor. They often don't say you're welcome. They say thank you back. It's because the seller values the money more than what they sold, and the buyer values the product more than what they paid. If you want an apple and have an orange, and I want an orange and want an apple, and we trade, we still have an apple and orange between us, but we're both richer because each of us has something worth more to us than what we had before. Thus, the double thank you when we trade. By contrast, a state-controlled economy is based entirely on force. Everything the government does, every single thing it does by force, because taxation is mandatory and not voluntary. And that is why no one ever writes thank you on their tax form, because the transaction was imposed. Even if it were a good transaction, it was not a free one. Free exchange allows the work for wages, product for payment, and investment for interest. A free people making free choices, building a free country. By contrast, a government-controlled economy works differently. As I said, it operates by coercion. It means, and in relationships of coercion, the strongest always win and the weakest always get crushed. As the Prime Minister liked to quote Thucydides in his Davos speech, the strong do what they will, the weak do what they must. If taxes, regulates, and blocks the productive economy, then uses your own money to create programs that promise to fix the damage it caused. This is not Robin Hood. It is the Sheriff of Nottingham. It takes from the workers, builders, taxpayers, and investors, running their money through bureaucracy, consultants, lobbyists, insiders, and letting a few drops trickle back down to the people who paid for it in the first place. This is state-controlled crony capitalism, a system where government concentrates money in fewer hands based on power. A system where most businesses and citizens never have the political clout needed to get a meeting, win a carve-out, secure a subsidy, or escape that regulatory prison. And make no mistake, regulatory prison is what it is. You want to build a mine? Wait. A pipeline? Wait. A home? Wait. A port? A road? A transmission line? A factory? A terminal? A refinery? A railway? Wait, wait, wait. Fill out the forms, hire consultants, lobby the minister, please the regulator, win some political influence, and maybe, just maybe, you'll have a chance. After years of delay, you might get government support, as the Prime Minister likes to call it. But if a project is good enough to receive regulatory support, why not just approve it in the first place? Why should a company have to win over a politician to get something built? Why should a project have to give up a piece of its ownership to the state in order to escape the prison of the heavy regulations? This is the model that the Liberal Prime Minister believes in. It's because that's the model that enriched him in the first place, not by doing business in the marketplace, by using political power to get favors for his company. We remember that he pushed for heat pump subsidies. Well, Brookfield sells heat pumps. We remember he pushed for money printing inflation. Well, the CEO of Brookfield confirmed on May 20th of last year that Brookfield profits off of inflation. Many of our things are regulated, rate-based or contractual in nature, and inflation is actually a positive to the numbers. So as inflation comes in, it actually helps the revenue streams of those businesses, end quote, said the CEO of Brookfield. And then, of course, this is a Prime Minister who said a little over a year ago that he had successfully lobbied for a more expensive form of so-called sustainable aviation fuel right before Brookfield, his company, invested $1 billion in that same fuel. So forcing Canadian passengers to pay higher airline fees for this more pricey fuel, which then his company profited from. This is not business, this is political manipulation. It raises the cost for everyone, especially those who don't have political power. That is the difference between the real economy and the protected economy. In the real economy, inflation crushes families. It raises grocery bills. It raises rent, mortgage payments. It costs you more for gas, heat, and electricity. It shuts young people out of home ownership and starting families. But in a political economy, inflation can be used as a revenue tool for elites and schemers. Government creates the rule creates the market, the insider sees the rule coming, the insider invests, the consumer pays, the politically connected profit. And everyone else is told this is progress. And Canadians will pay the price through higher inflation at the grocery store, taxes on their paycheck, and debt interest on future generations. We've seen this movie before. I just mentioned that there's going to be a big summit where a whole series of multinationals and billionaires will come and feast on this $25 billion. This is not a new idea. In 2016, the Liberal government hosted another international summit of investors at the Shangri-La Hotel to unveil the Infrastructure Bank, a $45 billion pot of gold that went to subsidize the investments of the insiders. So here we are, 10 years later, the same Liberal government holding the same kind of summit to allow the same elites to feast on the same debt. Since the creation of the Infrastructure Bank, it has lost hundreds of millions of dollars. For its first 7 years, its investment income failed to cover even its operating costs. The Parliamentary Budget Officer found that when all levels of government were included, $2 out of $3 for projects funded by the bank came from the taxpayer, not from businesses. Taxpayers lost, insiders won. The bank spent $250 million on operations. The CEO makes $600,000 a year. It paid out $8 million in bonuses in 1 year. That is why the parliamentary committee studied it thoroughly and recommended it be eliminated. And now, instead of doing that, they replace it with they augment it with yet another slush fund. Then again, in September of 2024, the Liberal Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, pledged to create a Canadian growth fund, seeded with taxpayers' dollars, to try and bring back the $1.2 trillion of pension funds that this Liberal government has driven abroad. And who was hired, who was tapped to administer that fund? Brookfield. Barely 2 years ago. And here we go again. Another summit, another fund, another transition office, another name for the same old Liberal idea, the illusion of change, the reality of more of the same. As Desjardins wrote, that the proposed fund draws strong parallels back to the Infrastructure Bank. The Montreal Economic Institute called it essentially the Canadian Infrastructure Bank by a different name. Same poison, new label, more costs, more corruption, more debt, more taxes, more on the credit card. This Liberal Prime Minister is just another Liberal. We've seen how we can build wealth when we unlock the power of the free enterprise system. The answer is not to weigh the economy down with even more government agencies on top of the countless that already existed a year ago and the 13 new ones that the Prime Minister has since created. We need to unblock and unlock the potential of our resources and our people? The answer is more economic freedom, the freedom to build, to produce, to hire, to invest, to compete. We must replace an economy of carve-outs, handouts, and bailouts for insiders with free choice, opportunity, and affordability. If a project is safe, lawful, and in the national interest, just approve it. If the company can build without taxpayers' money, let it build now. If workers can build bigger paychecks by producing energy, minerals, food, homes, steel, aluminum, copper, and more, get the government out of the way and let them do it. Let businesses compete for customers, not political favor. Let entrepreneurs win with the best product, not the best lobbyists. Let workers earn a powerful paycheck, not wait for government handouts. Let Canadians build sovereign wealth, not borrow sovereign debt. That is the choice. State-controlled crony capitalism, where political influence becomes the most valuable commodity, or free market, where work, savings, risk-taking, service create prosperity for everyone. The options are a top-down, state-controlled crony capitalist system or a bottom-up, merit-based free enterprise system, a political aristocracy, or, Mr. Speaker, an economic meritocracy. That is the choice. We want this to be a country that restores the promise to the people that anyone who works hard can enjoy affordable home, a safe street, good food on the table, realize their dreams. A country where our people get ahead by having the best product and the best work, not by having the most political influence. We do not want a country of bureaucrats and busybodies, of gatekeepers and grifters, of tax collectors and toll masters. We want a country of artists and adventurers, entrepreneurs and explorers, workers and warriors, pioneers and patriots. That's the country we seek to build. Now let's get building. Thank you.